And hello, welcome to Techspressionist Salon number 49. The topic of this salon is movement, and we're here to discuss that idea and concept. And sort of the purpose of this salon in terms of timing is to look at it as a little bit of a wrap up to the show at Southampton Arts Center, which just recently closed on July 23rd, and also look forward as far as the future of the project and what you all envision. And I just wrote down a couple notes to kick the conversation off. The first one is a question, and that would be posed to anybody in the room, which would be, what is an art movement? The second question is, what would you like to see in the future of Techspressionism? And the third one, a little more pragmatic, is there a specific initiative that you would like to take the lead on? So if anyone has an idea, or say a contact to follow up on, or the idea of a space that we could start working with, or basically anything, that would be sort of the gist of that piece. One thing I'm just going to throw out there just before I open it up, and if you guys want to use that raise hand tool, that would definitely help me get the different people who want to share sort of in a queue. What I've been doing on a regular basis, and this is really something that I was doing in the beginning, like sort of obsessively, was using the hashtag Techspressionism on Instagram, and then later I've started to use it more in Twitter, sort of optionally with little fire emojis after it. That's one that I tend to, for some reason, people respond to that hashtag Techspressionism, fire, fire, fire. But like using that as a comment on other people's work, that I think, wow, that's like Techspressionist work, that like epitomizes it. Almost always people like that, and I would probably guess that some percentage of those people are like, what the hell is that? And they click the hashtag and look at it and dig a little deeper. And that's the whole sort of side of this that to me relates to memetics and how this thing spreads. And so that's one really simple and fun way. And I find actually when I do that, I end up getting more engagement with my own content, because people are like, who is this person and why are they tagging my work with this term that I've never heard of before? So it can kind of work in a recursive way. And then lastly, like I said, I'm going to open it up, and I did invite anybody involved in any of the nodes, which are these international subgroups, to come in and sort of talk about what they've been doing. And I see that Renata has her hand raised, so I'm going to pass the mic over to her first.
Great, thanks, Colin. I have a couple of remarks or comments or questions first for you. The panel with Christiane Paul, I watched the recording of it. I had a meeting with Clive in person here in Toronto, and he said that was probably the best single thing that's happened to us, is to have the adjunct curator of digital art from the Whitney see the show. I believe she saw the show. But
yes,
how can one capitalize on that?
Well, I did, I reached out to her via email. I wasn't in direct communication with her at all through the planning of that that panel discussion, simply because I hadn't made that connection. Paul actually recommended her as a moderator, I believe, to the people at James Lane, who were kind of the organizers. And so, but I did, I was copied on a couple of threads. So I did email her, to thank her for her participation, and also to ask her if she had, received a hard copy of the catalog. And if not, I was happy to mail it to her. I did get an auto response back that she's basically not checking her emails regularly until the fall semester starts. So, like I don't have any expectations, but I did follow up on it. And I mentioned that it would be interesting if she has any interest, in the idea of Techspressionism at large, to invite her to maybe have a conversation that would include also Helen, Because I think that, you know, the combination of Helen's curatorial background, which relates directly to expressionism, whereas Christian is coming at it from the history of digital art, it sort of would be really interesting, you know, to see both people's take on what's going on with this project.
Early on, early on, and as the show was running, I invited her in because I ran a journal with her at the Whitney called Intelligent Agent for 10 years and that sort of thing. So I said, you want to come over and take a look at that, you know, and that sort of thing. She said she was going to come over. And I think that, you know, with Paul following up on her with her and that sort of thing, that probably, you know, gives you know, that in other words, it's probably solidly in her head now, you know. So the thing is that, you know, saying something like capitalizing, well, I mean, it's just really the matter of just, you know, in other words, someone at her level, it's a matter of just keeping visible, keeping active, and, you know, just stay on the radar. And, you know, in other words, it's and, you know, that's really kind of like good work, good relations, you know, usually does that sort of thing.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. You know, and I feel like, honestly, the most interesting thing that could come out of it would be her engagement in conversation about the ideas behind this, you know, and the idea of what constitutes an artistic movement in this sort of networked age, you know, and how that might relate to artistic movements of the past, things like that. You know, I mean, the Tech Week panel was specific to the blockchain, but I think, you know, her sort of area of interest is sort of digital art on a broader sense, right? I did get that book of hers a while back, and I think that, you know, the sort of the nexus of expressionism and its traditions and the evolution of digital art and technology-based work in general, I think, you know, this would be a fantastic place for a conversation like that to happen.
I'll give a little insight on where she's coming at. Is that one thing that she's you know, she's all right with 2D stuff, but I think what's going on here is that just in my experience with working with her, she's really interested in the, you know, in what is digitally native, you know. So in other words, it's like you know, like the Earth piece, you know, that got bought, you know. So I think that's the sort of thing that's, you know, really kind of like in her, you know, where she's going, and maybe Michael Reese's piece, you know. In other words, these things that, you know, that don't exist outside of the digital realm, you know, and that sort of thing. And it requires, you know, digital technology to, you know, to exist and that sort of thing. So that's just my, you know. But the thing is that I think the other thing is that, you know, go to the Whitney there, you know, she has a part of it called the Airport, and, you know, it's work that's commissioned, and it's usually something that's interactive and you know, dealing with networks and digital technology. And, you know, that kind of gives you a beat on what someone like her is interested in.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Patrick, when you say Michael Reese's piece, are you speaking about the inflatables?
Yeah. But the thing is that Michael's piece, you know, has the AR component, you know. In other words, there's a physical component, but, and then also like Claudia Hart's combines that, you know, she's been doing, that has a, you know, painting and sculptural component, but also has an AR component. In other words, it's like things that are, you know, if you've read some of her articles on NFTs, you know, one of the things that she kind of says, well, you know, hanging JPEGs off the blockchain, you know, isn't necessarily interesting to her, you know. And there's like, it's, you know, it's fine, but it's like, how do you do things that are medium specific, you know, or platform specific, that, you know, exploit the space in which it's being shown, that are specific to that particular way of showing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, you know, that, so, but the thing is that, you know, there are probably about 15 or 20, you know, key curators around the world who are, dealing with, digital art and that sort of thing. It's like Omar Khalif over at the Sharjah, and who else?
Well,
Ben,
there's Tina Rivers Ryan at Albright Knox.
yep.
I know Steve Miller actually mentioned that he reached out to her and mailed her a physical catalog. He
That's
hails
good.
from Buffalo, so I think he's got a
Yeah.
connection with the Albright. I know Anne
Anne's worked with her.
his work with her as well. So Davo, what's up, man? Good to see your JPEG hanging out in the Zoom room. Let's see. We'll
I'm here.
open it up. Hey, what's up, man? Yeah, Michael, you got your hand up. I see.
Yeah, thanks. So you asked really good questions. They're ones that I've sort of been mulling around as well. So, I mean, historically, most movements tend to have happened because people were in close proximity to one another, typically, and we are global, and so the reach that we have through Zoom and the insane amount of work that you did, Colin, to bring together a global exhibition, I don't think could have been as easily done in the past. So what I think is challenging and what I find really heartening with Techspressionism is that we're still coming together 2 years on. And for me, that in and of itself is something that speaks to a need that's being met by the group, that it's organic, that it's not top down, and that it's substantive. And I feel that the challenges that we have are that because we are sort of far flung from one another, that there's still regional necessities that can help bring together artists more easily than typically reaching out to a worldwide audience. Yeah, we could still do exhibitions online like what we've done in the past, but I think part of the education, part of the challenge that I think Patrick was talking about and that you hit on is because this movement or because this project, your social sculpture, isn't based on a technique, but that sense of an approach using technology, there is an educational component to this to let galleries, curators know what the hell Techspressionism is. What does it mean to use technology to create your artwork? It isn't just mimicking something as a JPEG. Looking at what the discussion was here, my work could not exist without the technology that I use. Even though I end up printing it, and a print is not anything new, the content in that print could not have existed without technology. And that's something, even though I can say those words, that still doesn't mean a whole lot to a lot of gallerists that I've talked to in the past. And that's where I feel the embodiment of Techspressionism in its many forms and the way it's manifested in the artists as part of this group. This is where I feel if we can point to, here, look at all these different things being made, these different ways of technology being expressed artistically, that gives credence, that gives a depth that we can all be part of, that we can all draw upon. And that's where I think we still have a lot of work to do. But I think part of that is in the newness of this. Sure, some of us have been slogging through this minefield for decades, But the fact that now we're at a point where it's becoming much more visible and much more economical in ways, I think we have some ways in which this can move forward. And I'm hoping that there will be some interesting ideas to push this forward.
Absolutely. I'm just going to go through the queue as I see them listed, and if you want to respond to the previous artist, or share your own thoughts, maybe we could do it that way just to keep things a little bit orderly. So the next artist that I see is Karen.
Well, first of all, thank you, Michael, for saying what I was going to say verbatim. I've been kind of around this community for a while. I've had access to sort of all the levels. And it really comes down to dialogue, community, and persistence. And the persistence has to be respectful. They deal with who they know. And what I'm gathering, because I'm working on sort of the archive end of this, that this term needs to get into archives. And so I'm starting to talk to museums, art libraries about Techspressionism. And we may have slogged through for the last 2 years, but they're just starting. And if we stop the dialogue in the community, they'll never catch up. So I think each one of us on that level has to talk with the people we know. And just like we do in our artwork, being community dialogue and persistence with respect, we have to do it for Techspressionism. So thank you for the great segue.
Thank you, Karen, and I appreciate what you're doing. I would say though, really, like, my feeling is no one really has to do anything. Like, I feel like, it's got to be something that, honestly, I feel that if it'll benefit the individual, it will be done sort of in the most effective way possible. That is, like, in the end, like, this term Techspressionism is something that I invented to package my own work for an exhibition 10 years ago, and Helen's involvement really opened my mind to the idea that this could be beyond anything that relates to my own work stylistically, by her sort of insistence in talking about Techspressionism as an approach versus a style, which was the word used in the initial definition. It was a style, an artistic style, and that was lifted directly out of the OED version definition for expressionism, which was an artistic style in which, in the expression of emotional experience. So
I didn't mean to imply that everybody has to do something. It's just that they do what they can to push the movement forward, because in a way, it's also giving you exactly what you just said, access to these levels, because they're
Right.
not going to talk to you as an artist, unfortunately.
Right.
They're really not.
Exactly.
But if you come in as a movement, or you come in, I was a gallery dealer. I could talk to anybody worldwide as a gallery dealer. It's like, hey, great, come on in, come on, we'll go have lunch. I sell them an artist and they're not going to talk. So it does help you as an artist get presence. So it's like for your own benefit.
Absolutely. Yep,
That's what
true.
I meant,
And
rather than
like,
you have to.
yeah, and in fact, like, this isn't this. I feel like it has allowed it has allowed itself to be a vehicle, like, for me, and I think that if it's viewed that way, like, I remember before I was involved in this, I helped put together a local collective called Emerging Art Long Island with another artist. This is a while ago, but and I was out in the East End of Long Island, and I remember being in some talk at the Parish Art Museum, which used to actually occupy the space where we had our show. And the director at that time, who I had reached out to numerous times as an individual artist, trying to set up a meeting, show her my work, whatever. And I came in, oh, like, we're during this show, Cross Long Island, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, oh, like, I have to find out more about this, All of a sudden, she was paying attention to me because I was talking as a representative of a group. Because, institutions, they need programming, and that's work for them to develop programming. And I feel like one thing that really sold the SAC folks on the show was that it was pretty compiled already. We just needed an exhibition space. And, the pitch was sort of there, and I think that this, presents a pretty good pitch to just about any institution, really. So to me, that would be a major action item for anyone that's really looking to like open doors for themselves, is just call yourself a curator, reach out and say, hey, like, I'm looking to curate this show. We have a big list of artists. We can pull together artists from any locality, in terms of West Coast show, East Coast show in Europe, show in wherever, kind of light on Asia at this point. But, generally, yeah, we have a pretty good artist index to draw from. And I wasn't a curator, and it's just organization, really. And
The
any
museums
artist.
I'm talking to, their ears are perking up, and they're kind of like, what? Because a lot of them, maybe not at the MoMA level, but everybody regionally, wherever you are, they're trying to define how to go forward. And they don't really quite know how to go forward digitally. And then you walk in with this platform and they go, wow, really? Can I know more? And that's pretty much been my response regionally for me. So, going to your community, art library, even a university library, whatever, or, a local museum, and saying, this is here, here's our digital catalog online. They seem to be very responsive.
Absolutely. Cynthia, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, sorry, hitting the unmute button wasn't as easy as it looks. I really have to thank Michael and Karen, both said exactly what I was going to say. So just, I can't say it's so important that we think about the fact that we are making work. I mean, Michael said this, one of the things that people may not understand is that the work might not look that radical, but we couldn't make it without the technology. So I think communicating some of that is really important. And the thoughts that I have is that I think we can't go about second guessing curators. They have their own preconceptions of what digital art is. And if we plunge ahead and do something that's meaningful, that echoes with our own community, that pushes us forward, then maybe we can pull the curators along. So I'm not suggesting that we leave them out, but I think if we try to second guess what we think they're interested in, I think we're going to be in trouble. I mean, I personally am part of this group for the sense of community. I find that it propels me in my own work. I think that that's a really important factor. And I think the more that we meet, the more that might happen. And so that's basically, what I want to say. I think we can talk about ways we might be able to package things for other shows. I mean, in general, I hate the idea of theme shows, but I think it might be an option if we think of a theme, a subject matter or conceptual theme far enough in advance, like at least, and it takes that long to line up shows anyway, but really far in advance so people could make new work for it. That's one way to do it, but there are a lot of different ways to go. So really, thank you, Karen and Michael. You said exactly. I think that global actually works for us. I like the fact that we're global, and so that's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Cynthia. And yeah, I think the global aspect is certainly what one of the main points of interest for the SAC folks, as well as the media partner as well, James Lane, who I thought, there really hadn't been anything like this done before, where most of the shows in that space had been topic based, but drawing off of a regional base of artists, so to pull something together, I think with an international group, I think it's of interest to an institution because it puts that institution in front of a lot of eyeballs that wouldn't necessarily ever have heard of it or be hearing about it. And that's certainly something that we could, do through things like fabrication of work, like was done for this show, or screen-based work, which provides its own sort of set of challenges. Through LinkedIn, I connected recently with a guy who runs an outfit called Black Dove, which is a really interesting company. They provide display technology specifically for NFTs. They do all the displays for Super Rare Space in New York and a bunch of other places. I think they recently partnered with the Seattle NFT Museum as well, which is a physical space, permanent physical space for NFT art. I think all these sort of venues, are worth looking at, and certainly any of you guys that might have relationships with, an institution, even if it just happens to be the local museum that you like to go to, hey, this is a good way to knock on a door and say, what's up, and you never really know what could happen. And I agree with what Cynthia said. We all, the idea of artist as curator is nothing new, and this whole shindig got kicked off with Davo and his idea with the collabs. As far as I can remember, those were our first shows, and he wasn't coming at this as, some old curator with an art history PhD. He's an artist like the rest of us, so each one of us has the capacity to come in with a vision, pull something together. If we can hook up with a physical space, that would be, important. But I feel like an organization like Black Dove, he asked me, the person who I've been in communication with initially asked me, hey, do you have access to another space in the Hamptons this summer? And I was like, I really don't, unfortunately. Like, this pitch was like a Hail Mary to begin with, but in the end, like, if we can come up with a cool space, that's a good pitch to them right there. Hey, we could showcase your display technology, pull an NFT show together pretty rapidly with the talent in this group, and or an open call, and that sort of thing. At this point, after putting a physical show together, doesn't really seem that daunting. It's just a bunch of organization that all can be done from the comfort of one's own home. So
I just wanted
putting that out there.
The SAC team that I met when I picked up my work, well, I actually saw the show the last day it was there and then picked it up. They were very professional and just really wonderful. I think we really lucked out on that. I don't know if every space, but literally alternative spaces that we would go into would be so professional. So thanks for lining up that space. It's great.
Yeah, that really was something that worked out, very nicely. And honestly, like, that venue was like, the vision that I had first putting this together in the very early salons. Like, wow, wouldn't that be a fantastic place to put a group show together? Because at that point I was still living on Long Island, and that was the space where I first showed my work as a teenager in a student show, when I was like 18 years old. So, like, to be able to put this together in that space is really, really pretty awesome. And, and I like the fact that they had those sort of like old Grecian like friezes up on the walls, all that stuff really like kind of, presented a nice foil to this contemporary work. And the staff, they were definitely awesome to work with. I'm going to be shooting down there next week to just pick up the rest of my stuff, and they said, hey, we got it wrapped up for you and whatever else. And so that's really good to hear. So let's see, Patrick. You're muted, man.
Everything's been really cool up to, at this point. That I think people are really nailing it on the head when they're talking about the idea of I've been in collectives about half of my career, and that's really been I would have never gotten as far as I have without collective power, really, to tell you the truth. Is that there's just in strength there's number, and numbers there's strength, and that sort of thing. And collective, in my opinion, has been much more powerful than the individual, but however the collective can help the individual. And the thing is that the other interesting thing about movements as such historically is the idea of a common ideology, and the one thing is that ours is pretty loose, but however it's the idea of at this point really kind of looking at revisiting expressionism through technology. And at this point in time, this is the fourth wave kind of, and that's still a strong position. And I think what happens is that as opposed to kind of saying we're this we're this new thing or something like that. In other words, basically what's going on is that we're the drawing on history is also a very powerful position as well, and saying we're the next wave of this tradition, and there's a lot of us, and we're speaking consistently, and that's the thing there. So as we're kind of following we're following the idea of expressionism, and but not necessarily the idea of transforming human experience through or humanity through this. It's like, I think we're kind of looking at that as an implied, but the the idea is that where do we engage the history and thematic material and that sort of thing to put a little more fuel into the engine.
It's an interesting question. I think that curatorially, it would be interesting to look at sort of some of the expressionist, significant expressionist works of the past as a group, or just to consider that aspect of the history of because if you look at sort of the etymology, right, we have tech and we have expressionism, and a bunch of people have thought it was actually Techspressionism, which is like kind of interesting. That might be a whole separate other thing for poets. I don't really know, but I think that yeah, it is easy to just say, well, it's a bunch of artists using technology to make their work, and just forget about that whole other piece, which is expressionism. To me, that's where like I was coming at when I kind of like came up with this idea, was looking at looking at people like Clifford Still or Franz Klein, or the Abex painters that really like caught my eye, and then
and
doodling
then
around on the computer.
I'm back in Kandinsky, Munter, and Jelinsky.
Right. And definitely I feel like Steve Miller, definitely influenced by Pollock and a lot of the other people that were working 10-15 miles from where his studio is, or even looking at Stella, who occupied his space. I could see his sculpture certainly falling into the expressionist bin as well. And he was an artist that used technology extensively in modeling his sculptures. I think that's an interesting piece of this too, is that a lot of work will involve technology, but it was sort of like backstage, like the story I like to tell about Franz Klein and how, these big black and white paintings were created through using a projector that he borrowed from de Kooning, blowing up these tiny little drawings of chairs and stuff like that. And at that time, that was high tech, and people didn't really they didn't know that. And I didn't know that until I read that story. And Helen knows all the specifics on what type of projector it was and everything else. But to me, like, those sort of stories are really interesting because, on the surface, people say, well, look at that painting. It was this madman in his studio, like taking giant brushes. No, he's actually like setting up his projector, so, it's something to consider. Howard, so you're up next.
I agree with everything that I've heard so far, and thanks for opening my mind to some different thoughts. But what I've been doing for the last year or so is just been talking about it every chance I get at every gallery opening that I attend, basically through the United States and Europe. And people, I'd say a while ago, and some still do, look at me like I'm Mork from Ork or something when I talk about Techspressionism or even use the word. They become afraid of it. But after about a year of continually talking about it, the gallery owners and publications are starting to think about it. Like, gee, what is this? And I got to admit, your website does, I send them all to the Techspressionist website, and they all of a sudden say, wow, this is amazing. The biggest exclamation mark to that is I've been featured in Artur magazine for quite a while, and they have a worldwide circulation of something like 2.1 million copies. That's paid circulation. They did a feature on me and Techspressionism, and they were so interested in it, they decided to do a hour-long TV show or documentary on basically how an artist like myself uses technology. And part of what I explained in that show, which will air probably towards the end of the year, is that artists have used technology since the very beginning. I said the technologies of some of the older artists was just a paintbrush, and that's a technology. That's a piece of technology, or a chisel is a piece of technology. I said it goes back to the Stone Ages of making something that'll clip out a stone. And they're sitting there saying, whoa, this really makes sense, because just calling digital art seems to be lacking a whole lot of inference. And it's people like yourselves that just keep talking about it, in groups that just keep explaining this, I think is doing a world of good. In fact, they've asked me to, just this morning, they asked me to do a solo show in New York, and they're naming it Techspressionism, Dimensional Fine Art Photography Stepping into Other Dimensions, which is like, whoa, that's pretty cool. But essentially, it's just beating on people, just letting them come along naturally. And I think they will come along because it gives, Colin, as you said, it was a way for you to express what you were doing 10 years ago. And thank you for that, because it's a way to express what I'm doing right now. And people are beginning to understand that. Hopefully more people will when, in the next year. So it's basically, I just say, keep talking. I don't think it can be forced. And I don't think any show will say, gee, this is really something. I think it's just people having to come together in their own head that, gee, there's a way of explaining this strange stuff that I didn't really know how to explain before. So thank you for having this group, and thanks for the words.
Thank you. And yeah, I mean, certainly, if there are any links that you have to share, feel free to share them in the chat, and definitely, send them over to me as well, through DM or whatever, once the show is up or once anything's published, and I'll definitely add them to our press list. I mean, to me, the press list, there's two press lists on the site. One is sort of a general press list, and one is specific to the exhibition that just closed. But anything that uses the word should be on the press list, as far as I'm concerned, because what the determining factor for a word being included in dictionaries is its frequency of usage, and once it gets to a point where it's common usage, it will be in dictionaries. Like, it's just an inevitability. So, the key to that is just using the word, posting it, whatever, but the fact that a third party would include this in the title of an exhibition that's being independently curated is pretty encouraging. That's really good news. So thank you.
Colin, can
Yeah.
I just make a suggestion, or I think a press list, or whatever is the correct term, to have that centralized, that should be on all of the Techspressionist artists. If you've had anything mentioned locally or whatever, we need to get that centralized, because I think that helps exactly what you're talking about. Plus, if we want to say, hey, go look at the press list on the Techspressionism site, it would be nice to know that we have an up-to-date and a really comprehensive list of things that somebody who wants to find out more and see how impressive the amount of work that's going on. I think that helps us all.
Yeah, so I just pasted a link into the chat. It's just at techspressionism.com/press. That's where the current list is. I highlighted a bunch of the more recent articles up on the top section, but there's sort of a comprehensive list that goes back to 2011. But certainly, and I do have a Google alert set up, for the term, and also Techspressionism. But if you guys have any, publications that you would like added that include the term, either one of those terms, certainly pass them on to me, and I will add them. Same thing with artists, for the index. Initially, a lot of that happened via Instagram and the adoption of the hashtag, or me personally reaching out to people. But if, you have a pal who's an artist who's like, wow, this stuff is really cool, it's completely kosher for anybody to say, hey, do you want to be added to the artist index? Because, this whole deal to me is really about self-identification, like, not someone else saying this person is and this person isn't. If someone wants to call themselves it, I mean, there's an account on OpenSea, and I don't even know who it is, and it's like Techspressionism something or other, you know what I mean? And it's these sort of like figurative expressionists, like painterly looking things. It's someone that was in the index. He never shows up in the salons or anything. It's really interesting how there's so many like layers to this thing, like an onion. There's the people that show up here, there's the people that use the hashtag but never show up here. Different, it's just weird. It's weird, but everyone is involved in the capacity that they want to be, which is the way it should be. So let's see, Cynthia.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk. I, too, enjoyed hearing what everyone had to say, and I think some excellent points have been made. Colin, earlier you mentioned that the Southampton Arts Center was very interested in, as are other art institutions, programming. And so I think that that's a great link for us to investigate. For example, many of us are involved with art institutions, and sometimes they'll have a call for digital art or even, manipulated photography, whatever, anything that would smack of Techspressionism. And I think in our own areas where we live, we could perhaps volunteer to talk about Techspressionism for that organization. And, everything from here's our website, here's what I do, and really, getting them to understand it that way locally. We hear the business people saying, think globally, think locally. And I think that point was made earlier by Colin, certainly, and Michael about, doing something locally. So we can do something small. We do something small when we use the hashtag. We do something larger if we're willing to speak about Techspressionism in a more formal situation within art institutions we may be involved with. I also thought when Patrick was talking about our definition of Techspressionism, what might be helpful within the definition would be to show some examples of what Techspressionism is, because even though some people think, oh, well, computer was involved, maybe they don't understand, things like Lucy does with her expression of Techspressionism. And some of us do some very different things, or again, where she works with this tapestry, if you will, that used it in a very different way. So I think those kinds of things would then make it seem achievable, so that someone might be interested not only in looking at it, but maybe creating it themselves, given whatever art field they're in. So I think maybe giving some kind of examples, and I know when we had these Zooms where someone would interview someone, whether it was the handshake Zoom or the ones that were done earlier, that of course enabled people, if they watched it, to see what that art was, what the expression was. So I think that's where we can get people interested, is if they see exactly what our art is and that it's varied. Now, you don't want to exclude people, and I understand that point by defining it so specifically, but I think to give out perhaps some examples within the area where the definition of Techspressionism is might be helpful to attract interest and to help maybe to define Techspressionism a bit more without restricting it. I don't know if that makes sense. But thank you.
Yeah, I think so. Like I recently switched the homepage up because the show has closed now. So I moved the exhibition, the SAC exhibition, into the exhibition section. And actually, like, I just wanted to mention this, even though I sent an email out to the participating artists, if anyone, was in the show and they want to include a link, for the resume or their website, the permanent link for the exhibition is going to be, and it is techspressionism.com/Southampton. So, it no longer resides on the homepage, but that's the best link to use, and it'll stay there, as well as, all the individual artist pages will remain there. And on the homepage now, it does have at the bottom of the homepage, it pulls the Instagram feed, which I want to really thank Renata for all of her hard work in curating that feed. It looks amazing, and just the the selection of the work is very thoughtful. The groupings and everything else like that, and pulling featured artists, I think it does display a good amount of diversity across the different styles, different types of usage of technology. Social media is really, really important, and I feel like one area, and this is sort of an open call for anyone that happens to be here or viewing this in recording, is We need someone who is interested and knowledgeable and involved in TikTok. I did, through the course of doing the Niftorian accelerator, someone came in who was, basically just doing social media for NFT projects, and she's like, you know what? If I'm going to use any piece of social media, it's TikTok. And I'm like, oh crap! Like I never use TikTok. And I set up an account for Techspressionism, posted a few things, but again, my brain can only handle so many different platforms at once, and TikTok is not one of them. So if anyone wants to be the lead on TikTok, I would gratefully hand it off to them. I did pick up as Twitter lead from Jan, who was taking a break. So I'm, curating the Twitter feed right now, or basically, tweeting and retweeting and running that account. So, and that's something I'm happy to do. And again, like with the use of the hashtag, this is sort of like a little daily exercise that I do. Is I just type hashtag Techspressionism, fire, fire, fire. I copy it, run through my feeds, scroll through. Oh, that's interesting. Comment, paste. Oh, that's interesting. Comment, paste. And then I come back later in the day, and most of the people are like, they like it. And some percentage of those people followed me. You know what I mean? And that's a really easy way to spread the meme, and also sort of, look at some cool art, be a sort of social curator of sorts, and define Techspressionism for the rest of the world. Hey, this is Techspressionism right here. And anybody can do that just by commenting with the hashtag. That's a real easy peasy way to be involved on an individual level without having to really do any heavy lifting, so you're just putting that out there.
How about even putting out the website address on Twitter, when you post the techspression.com?
Yeah, or the account, because of the character limit, is at Techspressions. Unfortunately, I think we're like one character over the whatever Twitter's limit is, which is really annoying. And I was thinking of like truncating it in some weird way or whatever else, but I wanted it to be something that people could sort of pronounce. But yeah, like definitely. But what I find is, honestly, and this is also from the standpoint of working as sort of like an internet marketing professional, is people don't like to leave the platform they're on. If you can keep them on the platform they're on and still sort of, get your message across, then that's going to be more effective than bouncing them out. Because really, like, people are there because they want to be there. I mean, it takes a lot, like, unless there's a real specific call to action, I think a lot of times it works best to use the hashtag. And the hashtag really is what kind of got this ball rolling in the first place. And I feel like now, especially now with the advent of NFTs and this whole new audience on Twitter of artists, right, that they weren't on Twitter 2 years ago. None of these people were on Twitter. They hated Twitter. I was one of those people that hated Twitter. I still semi-hate Twitter, but not fully anymore. Because there's all these NFT people out there, and a lot of the art is actually really good and really interesting, so to tag it up a little bit, is a good way to engage with that audience. And as far as I'm concerned, like the traditional gallery world is one world, and this NFT world is just another world. I mean, they're starting to overlap in this Venn diagram, but there's people out there who just completely function in the NFT space. This is how they support themselves. This is their world, their studio, like coming into the artistic experience through NFTs. And it's something where the power structure is flipped upside down. It really is. Just in the curation of this show, hey man, if someone sold one of their NFTs in the SAC show, it was up to the artist to give a bunch of the money to the gallery, not the other way around. That doesn't that's not normally the power structure, right? And hey, I'm just the curator. I'm not here to police anything. So it's the honor system. You know what I mean? But that being said, it's sort of a new world, and I think it's, you know, it's worth exploring. Let's see, we got Cynthia. Cynthia was just spoke. David.
Hang on, I'm here. Sorry, I was multitasking. This group has been like sort of an inspiration for me, and I've learned a lot. And for me, I'm not doing the digital art things. So for me, the Techspressionism is bigger than digital art and NFTs. But I would like to say I'm working on a new piece. I have no idea how it's going to come out. If it comes out, it's going to be really, really cool. If it doesn't, I won't show it to anybody. But what I did do was I was working on trying to figure out a problem for something I wanted to address. And the gentleman I'm working with found a product, which was a music tune, a digital music tuner that showed the note that is being played. And so because of the Techspressionism and the influence this group and these salons have had on me, they said, let's make this part of the painting. Let's put a digital tuner that shows the note that this is going to have 48 guitar strings on it that you can play. And so what we're going to attempt to do is actually have the music tuner embedded in the painting with a hole in the painting that pokes through, so you can actually see the note being played as it's being played. And so that's just, for me, that's adding technology to the artwork. And one of the main reasons I did was because of the whole idea of Techspressionism and working with technology. So I thought I would just share that.
Thank you, David. And yeah, I mean, I agree, you know, to me, or I sort of hear your sentiment. You know, it's digital art is one segment. NFTs are one segment. And honestly, NFTs I just see as a distribution mechanism. It's not art or not art. It's a distribution mechanism. Like it's a contract, right? I don't know that there's necessarily anything really other than that attached to it, other than each individual's sort of associations, you know, with the term, what it means, you know, but intrinsically, you know, it's a smart contract on the blockchain, you know, and it's, I saw something, I think it was actually Christiana Paul retweeted something about, you know, VFriends, like, is VFriends art or not? And I think her verdict was it's not. And you know, like, again, that's like, is this particular painting art or not, right? It's a subjective call. But I feel like what this whole NFT phenomenon does is it makes people talk about art. Even if this is crap, it's not art, at least they're talking about what's not art. You know, that's better than just talking about what's on the grocery list, right? You know, so I feel like that's, you know, that's probably a good thing for everyone. Let's see, Tommy, I don't think you've shared yet.
Thanks, Colin. And you know, I think that's really interesting what you ended up with about sort of the point of the conversation that art creates the space for, right? And what can we do with that space? Michael was talking about this sort of idea of community and everything, and a lot of people are really touching on this sense of like how Techspressionism has created this larger community, and you know, we all feel very much part of. And now that there's these nodes and a potential for sort of more localized connections, what's the potential with those spaces? And you know, sort of what formulas can we come up with maybe to help people create local spaces? And I don't think Sungjin Lee is on. I'm looking through, I'm on iPad, so I can't tell, but Sungjin invited me to his Digiana live performance night at a local space here in Midtown, which is, not the easiest place to find affordable spaces, but digital art is something that, people want to come see, and hear about, maybe for an evening kind of thing. Is it's not messy, for people who have a space that, are worried about that sort of thing. And it seems like there's, outside of the traditional gallery museum venue, there's always been this sort of avant-garde alternative space, salons, what have you, the Salon de Refusé. I'm thinking of like the Jazz Loft and, these cool places where people like really talked about each other's work, and how similar that is to what we're doing now here on Zoom, and how it could possibly be reproduced in person. Sung Jin is a person who's been energetic enough to put all these pieces together and make that happen. I'm hoping that like maybe that could be a part of the conversation. Also, I'm looking at my notes here because I have like a million things I want to say. NFTs are an interesting sort of perfect provenance, if you will, of ownership of a sellable thing. Part of that package that you create as an NFT, you can have tags. And recently I've been just putting Techspressionism as tags on my NFTs, sort of as a permanent mark of this, sort of idea. And, and it's, I think, important now on my work as a participant in the NFT space, especially. And I think that's a great place for, what can we do on a local, sort of an individual thing. And I am working with the Kingsborough Art Museum for hopefully a Techspressionism Summer 2025 show. And I'll be in touch more about that in the future, but I'm working on one. So everybody, whether it's institutions that exist, who are, I agree, very amenable to proposals as for a prepackaged clean group show that, doesn't mess up the space too much. I mean, really curators are very happy with, projected stuff that cleans up quickly. It makes it for an easy pitch, both in traditional spaces and these alternative spaces that I think are worth, if you have the energy, looking into. Sung Jin Lee, are you here? Is Giovanna here? She also knows about these guys. Anyway, so if it could happen in New York, it could happen anywhere, really. So that's what I wanted to share. Thank you. Thinking about this going forward, how do we continue the energy of the community, both globally and then also in these nodes, I think is a fantastic thing to think about as we head into the 50th meeting.
I agree, and that's really exciting that you have something brewing with the space. Like I feel like that's a starting point, is a space, and we have this asset of the group, which is this very broad artist list, broad geographically, broad stylistically, in terms of people working in all sorts of ways, with technology. And I think that the use of the hashtag on the NFTs totally makes sense. Most of the platforms support that. And yeah, like the NFT space, for better or worse, I think it's here to stay. I mean, I saw in my inbox just before I started this, I get, like the little bulletins from ArtNet or whatever. And I saw that one of the stories was that, this is like gross consumerism here. Tiffany's apparently is making pendants for CryptoPunk holders that are like diamond encrusted versions of their punks, and selling it for ETH, which is fantastic as far as I'm concerned for anyone holding ETH. But just to think about that, if that isn't sort of mainstream consumerist buy-in on this stuff, I really don't know what is. And those people probably are betting on something sticking around, right? I just thought that was it caught my interest because it was almost sort of comical, but but yeah, and Tommy, definitely appreciate, your participation on the panel. If you guys haven't seen the panel discussion yet, it is on the site. I'll post a link in the chat, but it's within the section for the exhibition, and then on the events page there. And that page also has all the recordings of all the different events that were organized as Zoom events around the show. So the international reception that Davo moderated and Roz did the walkthrough, and all of the different Tech Tuesdays that Helen moderated, as well as the different salons that were held over the course of the show. So it was cool that we could bring some other people into this space, and I think the question of the nodes and how those get how those develop. It's certainly up to the organizers of each node, I think. But to me, a sort of an ideal starting point would just be to pull together as the group of 4 or 5 people involved in the node and put a show together somewhere under the sort of umbrella of Techspressionism. It doesn't need to be anything grandiose or crazy, and there is some power in being in a physical space. People all of a sudden walk in there and they're hit with it. You don't have to target them; they just see it, and once you see it, that's it. It's in there. So, and plus, it's just a good. I just thought, initially when this idea of nodes started developing, I was like, hey, maybe I could just start an Instagram chat with all the different people from that country, and that's sort of like allowed conversations to start happening. But beyond that, I really appreciate what the the Iranian node folks are doing as far as getting their own salons going and recorded. There's a playlist on the YouTube channel specific to the Iranian node and their salon recordings. So, you guys are welcome to come check that out, and any of the other artists involved in nodes. Certainly, if you'd like to have a playlist set up within the YouTube channel, I'm happy to do that. As well as, the YouTube channel, it's starting to grow. Like, we're over 100 subscribers. We're 100 something, 38 or something. At 100, we were allowed to come up with our own custom URL. So now it's just youtube.com/Techspressionism, which is a lot easier than like the giant string that it used to be. And if anyone has any interest in curating video content, whether it's video art historical material related to Techspressionism, or whatever, just hit me up, and I'll set you up as an admin and set a playlist up. So Victor.
Yeah, it's great to be sitting in on this conversation, and I like what everybody's been saying, and I agree with just about everything probably everything that's been said. I mean, we all kind of like are in tune with this whole idea of Techspressionism. We're here, and we're thinking about the future and how. But I think everyone's really in coincidence. And one of my takeaways was this balance between moving forward, like thrusting forward as a group and as an individual, but in the context of the group, or attached to the Techspressionist movement or group, however you want to say it. So both those things are important, and as Colin early on recommended, that to utilize both of those prongs, those ends of the polarity, so to speak. So there's that. And then in that context, I wanted to share that, about a year and a half ago, when I first joined the salon, and my first share was talking about my book, which is a 43-year career retrospective. And it only goes to 2020, but in the last, year and a half, while I was finalizing, the print edition, I couldn't help but add things in from 2021 and 2022. And where they're added is in the introduction. So, I added the Techspressionism 2021 show, and then this recent Southampton show. So Techspressionism is in the book, in the introduction, and also now Colin is in the is name checked in the book, and he's in the index. Techspressionism is name checked in the index, referencing that page. And I also included Weird Media, Mr. Patrick Lichty. He's in the introduction too, because there's the synergy of Techspressionism and what he was doing there with the Weird Media show. So, I mean, that was unprecedented. You know, it's what started, I mean, the book is Acevedo in context. So the underlying premise is me and community, art in a context, but this is the most recent sort of iteration of that phenomena that I'm directly involved with, that I feel like, yes, I want to like tell the world that I'm connected to this group. I want to put, that's part of my personal art history, that as I go forward and tell my story. So that's kind of an example of this interplay. So I just thought this was a good time to share that. And just in closing, I've just recently completed the print edition copy, and I'm getting a tranche of books for what they call advanced reader copies. So it's not really being launched publicly, but it's sort of the reviews, try to get reviews stage, that kind of thing, pre-sales, if you will. So it's moving along, but it's great to now be operating in tandem with this group. I mean, it's fantastic. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Victor. And when the book is available, definitely, send a link over. We do have on the manifesto page a reading list that includes publications by artists who are included in the index, including Anne's book, Patrick's book, Joseph Nekvatal, he has a couple publications, and Holly's book. Anyone else, that does have a publication that you'd like added to the list, definitely share it with me. The site also, there's a lot of places where people can contribute. We do now have an essays page, which is on the main menu. It was there, and then it wasn't there, and now it's there again. And that has links to HTML versions of all of the different essays that are included in the catalog. So that allows, that text to be directly indexed by Google. And, that catalog, I think, it was something that was always sort of there in the back of my head, but I never really it didn't really start to move until Helen agreed to write a forward, and then I thought, well, this has to happen, and then actually Paul, he was like, well, I'd contribute an essay if you want, and I thought, well, there's a bunch of other artists also who are published, like I should reach out to them, and so it ended up coming together pretty quickly in like a week, the actual essays part of it. And, I'm glad that we have this document now that, can order. I ordered a bunch more copies just to send out to people, hard copy, and it's always available as a link as well, so that could be shared.
That's great.
So-
That's exciting, Colin. I'll definitely do that. You're going to see me disappear in a moment because people are arriving here and I have to greet them and help them come in. So if I disappear, that's why, but I'll keep you posted.
Awesome.
All right, cool.
Thank you, Victor. So it looks like we're coming up on 7 pretty soon, and there's a bunch of hands up. I think everyone who has their hand up has shared already. So I'm just going to open the floor up for conversation, and could just let it be sort of organic.
So, okay, so I have two quick points here. One, I've enjoyed doing the artist interviews in the past. Thanks to Roz for kind of kicking that off. I would like to possibly just put a thought out there for all of you. It would be really interesting to me if we could do maybe like 3 or 4 or 5 or so artists coming together on a subject and recording that and putting it onto the Techspressionist site. So I would be happy to kind of lead that effort. And if anybody's interested, reach out to me. I have a whole lot of different ideas that I would like to talk about at some point in time. And all of you are very interesting. And it's hard to talk about one subject with 30 people. It's a lot easier with a smaller group of people. And so it's something I think as artists, we're very substantive in our thoughts, and especially this group. So I'm just throwing that as an idea. And then the other thing is, for those of you who've been talking about putting a show together or curating a show, what I want to understand, because I know, Colin, you had budgets are always an issue at times. And I'm just wondering, for those of us who may have contacts with either corporations or companies or folks with money, whether or not that is a plus or a negative. And I'm just asking the question because I don't know what the answer is.
I appreciate what you just said, Michael, about inviting a smaller group, and definitely that sounds great. I'm just going to do a quick report on the node Techspressionism Canada. I just wanted to let everyone know that we have a Twitter account, and just like Colin had the issue with not enough characters, we've had to make a rather sort of odd an odd name. It's Techspressions_CA, but it's Techspressions with an X. Sorry, but that was the only way it would work out. And then we have an Instagram at Techspressionism Canada, all one word. So I wanted to let everyone know. And we have a website in the works, which Lee and Martin are actively putting together, and possibly some exhibitions coming later down the road. So thanks, and I hope you follow us on Instagram and Twitter.
Thank you, Renata. And I do have, I updated the nodes page relatively recently. It's just techspressionism.com/nodes. That has like direct links to each node's social media accounts. I do have to add in your Twitter account for the CAA node. But the other ones I think are all up to date. And it looks like, a lot of this node thing, and this is sort of like just human nature in general, it's sort of peer pressure. The other nodes see, oh, well, they have an Instagram account. And then all of a sudden, like, everyone got an Instagram account, which is cool. And I think it's interesting. It's giving people exposure. I noticed that Felix, who's in the German node, has started to use hashtag Techspressionism_DE, which is interesting, tagging up his work with a local hashtag, localized hashtag, which is a good idea. Very cool.
If I could just add, I'm going to put the Twitter address in the chat right now so everybody can get it.
Great. Oh, and so Michael, your idea about these sort of mini salons or these discussions, my question, as a coming from my day job background, what are we going to call it? Any suggestions, anyone?
Oh, geez, we need a marketing group now.
Well, say there's a playlist for these things. What are we going to call them?
Round table? I don't know.
That's great. Round table. I like that. Techspressionism roundtables, right?
Mosh
It's
pits.
got a nice ring to it.
Mosh pit.
And actually, you know what? I mean, Roz, I don't think Roz is in here. Like when she came up with, was it both of you guys or her idea? I don't know who came up with the handshake idea. But, like at this point, now that the show is over and I'm not like completely like underwater, I'm happy to put a playlist together. If I can just get a list of links And that's pretty easy to do. That way they could all be consolidated under a playlist within the channel. I just was initially like, well, everyone's got their individual interview links. It's going to be confusing, but at this point, like the content exists. It doesn't hurt to consolidate it, and hopefully it'll get some more views.
I got a question. How many handshakes happened? Was it just basically Roz's and Victor and me?
Yeah, I think so. That's all that I'm aware of.
No, Tommy and I did one. We have ours on Vimeo, but I'm going to send the link to Colin so we can put it up on YouTube.
It's on Vimeo?
That's great.
It's on Vimeo. It's on my Vimeo, but I will send the link to Colin.
Okay, well, I want to watch it. I didn't know it existed.
Awesome. Yeah, if it's cool for me to download it and then repost it directly to YouTube, then we could do it on the channel. And if you guys, the rest of you that have these handshakes, if you could just email me the link or text it to me or whatever, then I could save it to the channel and create a playlist around it. But yeah, that's an awesome idea. And I feel like video content too, it's something that's compelling and people could do fairly autonomously. So, that's definitely cool. Even stuff, this is another thing that like popped into my head the other day as I was thinking, well, like I live 20 minutes from Bennington, which is a decent school. Like maybe at some point I'll look up whoever runs their digital department. Williams is nearby too, which is a good art program. And say, hey, like, would your students possibly be interested in a presentation about this online artist group? And I started thinking about how academia could play a role in the development of what we're doing here. Certainly, like, I think it might be of interest to students as potential publishing platform, networking, way to meet other people, get their ideas out there, and certainly there's a lot of energy there, so just putting that out there, even my my fantasy mind was like, oh, maybe like they'll start their own node at the college of like all the Techspressionists, like a club, you know what I mean, or whatever. Like, like it's not inconceivable, but it would need to be sort of presented in some sort of way. But I think the topic could be an interesting presentation for people involved in teaching or whatever, so just putting that out there for you folks in that world.
I have a question, kind of going what you're saying, Colin, about, the sort of having something digital doesn't hurt. I'm obviously coming from the archive end, and, I can talk to these people and it kind of goes in one ear and out the other. And I can send them to your site and they love it for the moment, but then they get distracted. So it would be really nice if I could have some kind of leave behind for them. And I'd love to give them the catalog to the show, but I can do that a couple of times and then I have to pay the electric bill. So I was wondering if we, and everybody can chime in on this, whether we put together a thumb drive of the Southampton show and I present it to archives in different museums and art libraries for them to have actually in their system. Because it's a lot easier for us to get the thumb drive to them, but it's up to everybody because it's not my show, it's our show.
Well, I guess everything that's online is at this point publicly accessible. I'm not sure. What would be helpful would be to know in what format these archives could best utilize the content. I could certainly, pull together the material, whether it be off the site. There's definitely tools that'll download a local copy of a site that's database driven, stuff like that then could be thrown onto a thumb drive,
And
or
I'll ask them what they would consider in order to be in their collections. I mean, it's just a conversation to figure out how can I hand them who we are and have it stick. That's all. So
Totally.
I'll
And,
ask
you know,
them.
outside of sort of traditional institutional organizations, there's also all of these sort of online things starting up where it's essentially, you know, an NFT collector who is creating a thing. And there's like a lot of these around. And one of them is Apollo Art Exchange. Apparently they're curating a Techspressionist like room in their virtual space. And I've been in contact with this person, not sure of their gender, doesn't really matter. They're, I believe, based in Texas, and Le Chat-Noir, which I'm butchering, our French colleague over there in the French node connected me to this Apollo Art Exchange, but they're on Instagram and Twitter, and apparently they're putting together sort of a Techspressionist component to whatever they're organizing. But yeah, certainly happy to you know, try to get you whatever things you might find useful. Yeah, and the catalog, unfortunately, I mean, this is what Blurb charges. I mean, the markup is literally $0, so there's no profit involved. That's just what it costs to print a one-off, essentially, of a print-on-demand book at this point. I wish it was less expensive. If people could get together, I know that there's a 30% price break when you order 10 or more books, but that would involve people sort of like figuring that all out. But yeah, anyway, anyone else? Holly, do you have I see you have your
Yeah,
hand up.
oh. I've got to
You're muted.
Oh, you're muted, Holly.
Am I good?
Yep.
Okay, check out the Woodland Pop exhibition at Confederation College in Thunder Bay. I was so stunned to see NFTs, and there was one that was already purchased by the college. The work is extraordinary. How these emerging artists are responding to their social condition and to the environment. And I never expected to stumble over this on this trip. It was amazing.
Cool. If you have a link, if you could post it in the chat, that would be great. And I do see some chatter in the chat about a DAO. Again, I've voiced my opinion on this. If anyone would like to start a Techspressionism DAO, you have my blessings. Other than that, it's an area that I am not comfortable in taking the lead on at this point. Just don't know enough about it, and don't want to be the guy whose social security number is attached to it. So anyone else that wants to do it, though, by all means, you know, there's plenty of tutorials out there.
Expressionism coin.
Hey, again, I know there is one platform that is doing artist minted coins, right? Lovid was saying they were going to do their own coin at some point. Certainly.
Well, I mean, a lot of this stuff started out, you know, with Kevin McCoy, you know, basically launching, you know, art, you know, pretty much launching what became NFTs in 2015. And I mean, that was all about art anyway.
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, you know, and then, you know, just as a wrap up, I know that Michael did open the question of sort of corporate sponsorship. It's a pretty dicey one, you know. I've certainly toyed with that idea of making some pitches so that I could, you know, potentially, you know, do less of my day job and more of this, but it opens the door to corporate control of your platform as well.
Quid pro quo. You know,
Yeah,
the
so
thing is, yeah, you get some funding and there's usually some quid pro quo.
right. So, like Kunstmatrix, that's a beautiful partnership. We put their branding on our footer. We get to use their platform. They don't really care what we curate onto their platform. And certainly people have asked, is that something that's open to the nodes to use if we organize our own online shows? Absolutely. And not only the nodes, but any artist that has a curatorial idea connected to this group, I'm happy to share credentials with to do an online exhibition, just like Davo took the initiative to do as we were just getting started, with the collabs. So anybody that has an exhibition concept based around a topic, or a bunch of people in the group want to pull something together, make it a Techspressionism show, by all means, that account is for this group. And although my rational mind is saying, okay, now the show is down, time to take a break, get back in the studio, start making your own work. Of course, there's the little voice that's saying, well, you could, organize an NFT show for next year, or do XYZ, so, and that's kind of like the thing that makes this interesting, is there's an audience that's developing around this thing. So anybody that has an idea, this is a real good platform to use as a jumping off point. So it's getting around that time to stop the recording. But it was a real good conversation, around the Zoom room tonight. I think, it's a nice break to just have a little talk, session for this salon. We're coming up on salon number 50, which is crazy. One other thing that I thought of quickly before we close is that it might be interesting, as one of the formats that we use for our salons, to do sort of an old school crit, and have people sign up in advance, whoever, maybe limit it to X number of artists. Maybe it's just one work, like the way that it used to be in grad school. Oh, this is what I'm working on. And then people bash the hell out of it.
Oh, if you want to go back to grad school, Colin, come on. You remember what happened one night.
I remember Angie saying to me when I said, my work is about the process. She goes,
Yeah.
that's not good enough.
No. And
Tell us what it's about. And I was like, shit.
Yeah, exactly. And that night, basically, it erupted into basically everybody running around the entire school screaming FY to everybody else, and that was it. So I mean, it was good natured, it was fun, but I mean, on the other hand, it was cathartic.
Well, I think the outside of an MFA experience, like, I didn't really get a crit, in undergrad, because, we're learning how to paint, and the teacher's encouraging us. We're just like doing our thing, but in grad school, it's kind of like a little bit of a different scenario. And I feel like, like, that actually forced me to think about what the hell my work is about. Like, not just regurgitate, well, I'm printing on top of a hand painted ground, and shop talk, like, what is it about, and I think that that's actually, pretty interesting, and could make for interesting content as well. So maybe that's something we could think about as, some sort of a, and I like the quick share, show and tell. There's a variety of different things, and that's kind of like what I think signifies the possibility of this being something along the lines of a social sculpture, that is coming up with structures in which we can all participate in a way that we're making engaging new material. Like, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Cynthia.
I just want to say, I was actually in a crit yesterday with the Jewish Art Salon. And in fact, Dina Eber was one of the presenters. I think a lot of people know her. And I just wrote up my ideal online crit, which I can send to people, because I think there's a lot of exploration about how to do that. And I mean, one of the key things is that people only present for 5 minutes, I think, because when you do an artist presentation, you go like a lot longer. And you just kind of said that, put up one word, maybe like 3 words or something. But I have a lot of thoughts about that. I think people are removed enough from the teaching experience and the grad school experience to remember the balance of saying something positive and negative. People who are still teaching are totally immersed in that. It was really interesting to watch other people actually with less experienced artists be like so gentle. And then, you know, it's like, no, people didn't come here for you to compliment them. They want to hear both, the balance. So, well, I think it's a great idea. I'd love to do that. So that would be great. Just want to
Cool.
add another thing that I really would like to see us do is talk about output someday. Because people are exploring all different ways of output.
Okay, different ways of fabrication.
Fabrication, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's a good title for an upcoming salon. And in fact, Cynthia, if you're interested in moderating a crit style salon, I would certainly invite you to do that if you have any interest.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Can't do anything until October. I took on another project that is, I'm buried, but I'd be happy to do that.
Cool.
So also to talk about different ways of fabrication, because I've explored lots of different ways and I still am not sure what's right. So.
Awesome. And then we have one more. I'm going to close with Susan just because we're just over the hour and a half mark.
I was just going to write in the chat, but I can say it here. I'm interested in forming a Pacific Northwest node, and I don't know if there's a process about going. Do I just contact the other people on the list, or are there people in this meeting that, anyway?
What I would recommend doing, Susan, is starting an Instagram chat and add me to it as well with any of the other artists, you know, in that local area that you want to add. That's how I started up, you know, connected the people in the other nodes initially. It's a really easy way to do it. And sort of it's, you know, very asynchronous, you know, in terms of people see they have a message in this chat and can jump in at any point. And then, yeah, certainly like once, and the only real requirement for a node, as far as I defined it initially, was that it has at least 2 artists, so that, you know, that's a starting point. And then if you want to, you know, get a bunch of people together, see who wants to be involved in it, and then let me know who would be, you know, kind of considered the founders or whoever wants to be listed on the node, then I could add that. And that would be, you know, the first regional node. And I think this concept of nodes certainly can extend, you know, in a variety of different ways, not necessarily just by country. So
okay, great.
Cool.
Yeah, I noticed there were some
Awesome.
people in Portland and Seattle. So.
Yeah, that would be fantastic for sure. For sure.
Okay.
And I think that model makes sense, because if we're talking about organizing localized exhibitions, you know, we have to be realistic as far as logistics and how can we get work there and who's going to actually show up and stuff like that. So very, very cool. All right. Well, I am going to close the recording now in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.